Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome into Take Command. A new week kicks off with Logan Paulsen, who spent a decade in the NFL. I'm Grant Paulsen. You can check me out on 106.7 The Fan from 2 to 6:30 every day. Logan, we have gotten to kind of one of the lulls of the offseason now. You're post-draft. You are post the schedule release last week, which we'll get into in a minute. But things are about to ramp up again on May 27th through the 29th with OTA offseason workouts, phase 1. That's the first of 3 batches because they do it again on June 2nd through the 4th, June 9th through the 11th. And we mentioned this on the last pod, but we're under 3 months away from the preseason opener. So when you look at it, like, yeah, you get a down period here, but this is what the NFL does. It's a machine. We've already punched through the majority of the offseason with free agency, then the draft build up in the draft, and now the schedule release.
Yeah, it's really funny. You always forget how quickly the season comes around. Like I remember the week before the draft started, the guys were in the building kind of for phase 1 of the offseason. And then they obviously kind of go, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of phase 1. Then they move into phase 2 and they're doing phase 2 stuff now. So they're, doing stuff on the grass or including football stuff in addition to the conditioning and the weightlifting they're doing, they're meeting. So for them, I know it feels like nothing's going on, but this is where they're starting to lay the foundation for the season. And it's really kind of cool to think about what's happening inside that building at the moment because it's Durante Jones leading that defensive meeting for the first time. It's David Blau leading that meeting for the first time, kind of imprinting his coaching style, his personality on that offense. And really, these meetings are the foundational elements for what the 2026 season is going to look like. So we did a lot talking about, the schedule, what's going on in the last episode, but really that foundation of what that is going to look like started a couple weeks ago, actually.
There is this ambiguity too that you can clear up maybe about so there's elements of the offseason like now where theoretically there's not like hands-on time for coaches and players or what have you, leading up to now. Like how much have guys been in the building? I mean, I'm sure it's different for every guy, but are you allowed to go work out all offseason and just be in the facility every day if you want to be a gym rat who's based in Ashburn? Like on a week like this, where there's not an OTA and there's not a lot going on. If a fan got access to the building, like what is happening?
Yeah, so now we're in phase 2. Like this is part of the offseason program, and I understand that it's voluntary, but it's kind of that voluntary mandatory setup. And so I'm trying to remember the exact setup, but it's basically like you can be in the building. It goes from being in the building in phase 1 for 4 hours and coaches don't have access to you on the field. You can meet, obviously, but then you go to a 6-hour work week.
I want to clarify that because that's even something I didn't quite understand. So on the field is so different. Like that's how the league kind of does it in the PA, especially. It's like stay away from the grass, don't get on the field, nothing physical, leave the body alone or whatever. But you're saying like they could be in the meeting rooms grinding over the scheme and installing and basically learning the entire playbook with meetings right now.
Yeah, I'm just because I played the majority of my career under the new CBA. So phase 1 is like kind of conditioning and lifting. And then that's 2 weeks but you do have meeting time. And so that meeting time, I remember you kind of install the huddle. You talk about the cadence. You might touch on day 1, day 2, watching some cut-ups from last year. Obviously, if it's a new coordinator, you would watch cut-ups from their previous stop and kind of get a feel for what the offense is. And then you get into phase 2, which is now, again, you were on the grass with the strength coach in phase 1. Now you're on the grass with the coaches in phase 2. And so you can do, you can throw routes on air, you can do things, but it's like non-competitive. So I can't line up across from a defensive player. I can block a bag, I can catch a football, but there's no competitive element to that drill. So that kind of takes the install to the next step, right? Where it kind of says, okay, we were in the classroom. Now we're probably in, kind of that day 2, 3, 4 install range. We can bring that stuff to the grass. We can talk about spacing, route depths, kind of start working some timing with the quarterback and the receivers. Offensive linemen, again, there's no competitive reps, but I can hold a bag across from you. I don't even know if they can do that now anymore. But that was a thing where it was like no one can be across from you, right, in any kind of capacity. So that's kind of where they're at right now. So really, I think the majority of the team is in the building at the moment. I'm not sure. I know there are some people that aren't here for injuries and family reasons, things like that. But, I think last year they were in like the 97% attendance rate during this phase, which is pretty unusual. So
Take command, Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen. The big news last week, obviously we dropped the pod on Thursday night into Friday. The schedule was released. The reaction has been not surprising, but I found it a little bit funny just because we already knew who they were playing. Like now we just know when they're playing them. But I will say there's been like negativity or fear. I mean, the early part of the schedule is a grind, there's no doubt. But taking calls on my radio show, the social interactions I've had, Twitter at Grant Paulsen, Instagram at Grant H. Paulsen with people, it does feel like now that people have seen the schedule, they're going, wait a second. Shouldn't Washington have gotten the third place schedule? Like what happened here? We knew the opponents already. I agree that the first couple quarters of the year and probably the first half of the season is a murderer's row. We talked about getting through that and maybe on the other side, the sun coming out after the rain a little bit. So you're just trying to par the course maybe for a handful of weeks, stay around 500, then birdie a bunch on the back nine. But look, there's no doubt. I mean, fans are definitely anxious about the way that the early part of that schedule looks.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what happens when you play in a division that's as competitive as this one, right? Like Philadelphia has been a class team in the league for a couple of years now. Obviously, 2 years removed from a Super Bowl. We talked about the Cowboys all the time, maybe getting overhyped. But I think based on what we saw from that team last year, very, very competitive, especially on the offensive side of the football. I think that's a top 5 offense. Love what their new coordinator's doing there. And obviously the Giants, because it's a division, it's going to be tough. And then obviously you get the tough draw of playing San Francisco, LA, Seattle, Arizona, and 3 of those teams are, I'd say, top 10 teams in the NFL at the moment. So, like, that's just the nature of kind of divisional play and who you're matched up with. And that's a little bit of luck of the draw. Obviously, when you get into that third place kind of schedule, the other teams you're playing, they feel a little bit more comfortable in that regard. But this is the NFL, man. Like, you're going to play tough teams, and every team is good, and that's why you play the game. It's not like college football where there's this huge discrepancy in skill set. It's very, very close. Even like the worst team in the league could beat the best team in the league any given Sunday. And I think when fans look at the schedule, I think they feel some of that watching this thing. And especially, I think the other thing that we talked about a lot in our breakdown was just how dense it felt at the beginning. Usually those games are kind of intermixed and it doesn't feel quite as meaty. This felt very, very dense at the beginning with, again, you don't know what these teams are going to be like, but divisional games, teams that have been traditionally good quarterback play, and good defenses. And traditionally, that just means that those guys are going to be good football teams kind of long term. So
another thing that we did find out over the weekend was that the Commanders are going to be having joint practices ahead of their preseason game with the Miami Dolphins. Now, we'll see if they pull out like the Baltimore Ravens did last year and screw Washington over because, I guess it's not set in stone until it happens. Having said that, that was pretty rare. Big deal to me. I think it's a huge part of the preseason ramp up at this point, especially a year ago, the way Washington handled their camp. It did feel like they put a lot of their eggs in the, hey, we're going to get our work in these joint practice baskets. And then you took one of those opportunities over a couple days away. And it's almost like, think about school and lesson plans. Like, hey, we're not going to do a ton Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday because we're getting after it Thursday, Friday. And that was kind of how they plotted out 2 huge periods of, the preparation to get ready for the season. When they lost those Ravens practices, it felt big. They obviously tried to supplement with a fun little burgundy versus gold scrimmage that ended up being one of the highlights of camp. But for people that, are still coming around on these joint practices or maybe don't love them because of all the fights and the brawls, I understand that. But I do have to say, having now covered the league when these started back in like 10 to 13, they're just so much more helpful than a preseason game because you're able to dictate every scenario that you want. In a preseason game, you're not able to get goal line work if nobody ends up first and goal, right? On the 2-yard line. You're not able to maybe work in, the red zone that you want to get in, or let's make sure that we have this sudden change opportunity. Like you and the coach get together and say, hey, what are the things you guys want to get done? All right, here's the 5 things we need to work on. I want to run my field goal unit out there after an incompletion or whatever. You get to do all of that and dictate all those terms in a practice. So it's just so much better. And they didn't get that chance last year to the extent that they wanted to. We've only heard about the Dolphins. I'd like to think they could get a couple of these on the schedule.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's, again, it's some of the specificity you're talking about in terms of situation, but also I think teams feel way more comfortable showing more in joint practices. And so it's just a kind of a way, I think, to troubleshoot. For example, like Durante Jones wants to run some type of zero pressure or some type of 5-man simulated pressure, and you get a front or a space, or you get an offensive run surface that's a little bit different than the one you practice against. Like, how do the boys handle it? Do I need to go back and say, man, we need to make sure we review this pressure versus multiple fronts? It's the same thing with different runs. Like, we've been practicing against this 3-4 defense the entire camp, and all of a sudden now we're going to see whatever Miami's doing, whatever type of pressures they like to run. How do the boys handle our outside zone versus that? Or the gaps, or our gap scheme rules really tight versus these different fronts? And do the guys feel comfortable with it? Because if not, we got to go back and review. So I think it really gives you an opportunity, not only as a player, but as a coach, to really evaluate where the roster's at, again, from a talent standpoint, but also from a knowledge standpoint. So I think these are, again, as a player, I hated them. I found them very frustrating. But as a coach and as a front office person, I think they're invaluable. And so I think the more of these they can get, the better. And especially with a young quarterback like Jaden Daniels, you want to give him as many competitive reps as you possibly can, but you also want to keep him safe. We talked about ad nauseum in the preview show. It's not only, ramping up and being ready to go, but it's also being healthy. And so I think the joint practice kind of helps you toe that line in a really nice way.
Take command with Logan and Grant today. We're going to talk Stefon Diggs as a possibility at wide receiver in a couple of minutes. Also want to get into some mailbag questions that we have that came in that are really good. That's all coming up. Real quick, before we step away in this first segment, I wanted to just bounce my power rankings of road trips on the schedule this year off of you and see how you feel about these. Okay.
So now, these are like best environments to go eat out at, or what are we talking about?
You know me very well. That's a great bit. No, this is just the road trip I would most want to take based on the road schedule.
Love
now, a couple of clarifications. I canceled out Minnesota because it's late December, and it's freezing cold, and that's disgusting. I also went there last year, and I love that stadium. It's actually built by the same people that are doing the Commanders Stadium, and it's the jewel of the National Football League. So if you've never been to that stadium and you want to do a little reconnaissance work on what RFK 2.0 could look like, might be worth your trip, but you better bundle up. So I didn't include that. Philly in week 1. I may go to that and cover it, but that's not a road trip deal for me. I'm going to be there in July for the All-Star festivities, taking my kids. So I don't have that on the list either. But here's what I did. 1 through 6. London is number 1 for me internationally. Obviously, you go out, you have fun in the city I've never been to. I've never been to Europe. I don't like flying over the ocean. I don't have a problem flying. Like, I'm team flying. I've never had an issue on planes. But I don't like the idea of being over top of water for that many hours. I like to be over land, where if something goes wrong with the plane, we can land at an airport, fix it, and get back up in the air. So because of that, I've been pretty landlocked. I've gone to Canada, and then for my honeymoon, I did St. Lucia, which was like a shorter trip over ocean of the Caribbean. I didn't really have much of a choice. It was kind of like that, or my wife was really going to be angry at me right after we got married. So it had to happen. But London, I think I could do a red eye, sleep overnight, maybe. I don't know.
And they do kind of hug the coastline on the way up there.
Everyone says this. That's not a thing. It's just not.
They do. Like on the flight map, they kind of hug it up. And again, you're still over the water, but you're like, the land's right over there. A couple 100 miles to your left, we got some land. Now you're not
coast a few thousand miles. Everything will be fine.
Well, you're not going to Spain where it's like, hey man, you're over it.
Yeah.
We're in it.
You'll notice one of the two of us didn't go to Spain. Okay. There's a little too much water between me and Spain, but this is what everyone told me. This is why I didn't go. I'm like, I don't know, man. That's a long flight over water. And everyone's like, no, they'll ride the coast. And then I was like, okay, let me just watch a flight. I'm going to just find a plane. Let's do a little simulation. You know what they did? They started here. They drove straight across the water. I'm sure it's drove, by the way. They drove straight across the water and they got to Madrid. There was no hugging any coasts. Okay?
Well, with Madrid, 100%. There's no hugging. It's just straight across. But with London, because you got, what is it? You got the eastern part of Canada, right? Up over Greenland, Iceland, right? And then you kind of have a little bit of a jog.
Are they doing that strategically, do you think?
I don't know. You'd have to ask someone who flies planes. Like, so if you're a listener of this show and you fly planes, like, and you got an inside baseball on that, like, let's talk through it.
I'd be nice if there's a listener of this show who actually flies planes. I want you on the next Take Command so I could interview you about this. I get so steamed up for flight and pilots. I mean, those are just
planes. You're a fanboy of DC sports and planes.
How does it work? I mean, it's the dumbest thing ever. We're just hanging up there for 10 hours if we want to, just 15 hours, no problem. Want to go to Australia like the 49ers?
That is a crazy one. That game in Australia is crazy to me, Coach. That is crazy to me.
It's just that's wild work. Well, Kyle Shanahan was like complaining about it. They're like, dude, I know. I'm sorry. Also, you're going to Mexico City now. They're like, yeah, you're right, dude. That was a lot. And now you get to go to Mexico City. 40,000 miles. Nobody's ever done it before. Enjoy your travel.
Yeah, figure it out.
Trips. I think, that's a big ask. Australia?
Dude, huge ask. And I understand why you want to do it, right? Because again, like, think about like Jordan Mailata, like the rugby community there. Like, you want football to grow in those areas where you get these big athletes that are playing rugby, like, to be like, oh yeah, I'd like to play this sport too, 100%. But that is a long trip, my brother. And I'd have talk about being over water for, actually, do they go just straight over the Arctic Circle for that one? Or what are we doing there? I know we're not like.
I have no idea. I'm not a geography major. I can't tell you. What do you think they do?
I don't know. There's one of them where they go, you think they'd go, oh, we're going to go east or whatever, but they just go around like they over the top of the North Pole type of deal.
That would probably be Australia. I know that it's an 18-hour flight. So they don't do anything quickly, whatever they're doing. But the other thing with Australia is, good luck not getting eaten by a weird animal before the game starts.
Dude, it's not even eaten, man. Like, what is it? What is their thing there? They have more venomous animals than any other continent in the world.
You're getting off the plane. There's just like a hawk moth coming at you. There's a numbat. What about the laughing kookaburra? I mean, is it the short beaked echidna? I'm just looking.
Are you looking up animals right now, Coach?
Yeah. Tasmanian devils in Australia. Mistletoe birds. They have mistletoe birds in Australia.
Dude, I don't care about the birds. I'm cared about those spiders, the snakes, the
saltwater crocodiles. You thought about those?
I think about those all the time. Yeah.
And freaking snakes out the wazoo, just hanging from trees. They're just you go. Oh, you better look in that toilet in the hotel before you sit down.
You better check it out.
King cobra is just coming up like, oh, what's going on up here? Anything I can bite? Anything hanging down low that I can nibble on? I mean, this is a terrible situation.
I know we have some actuallys out there. Probably, I don't think they have king cobras, but they do have like black mambas and all sorts of crazy stuff down there. So it's. Are you looking that up?
Oh. Yeah, I am right now. By the way, my bad. They only have black mambas. I guess everything's okay.
That is your bad. It's your bad.
Yeah. I mean, for a second, I thought Australia had scary snakes. You'll have to forgive me. I mean, what a stupid place animal-wise that is. It's insane.
It is a crazy place. It's a crazy place.
Like, they just have like spider, like instead of rain, they just have spiders that fall on you.
That's what I've heard, yeah, that it's like they have spider storms, yeah, they just come through and then.
I mean, this is insane.
Yeah, it is insane.
No chance Brock Purdy makes it a kickoff. No chance. It's just not happening. I mean, that is crazy. But anyway, I think I'm going to do the London thing if we can sort it out radio-wise, because it's a gigantic pain in the butt in terms of when do I get back? How do I not miss a show? All that stuff. But I'm working my way past do I never want to leave the United States of America for fear of this water thing? And
I didn't realize it was this big for you, Coach. I knew this tangentially was a thing for you.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize you were like making travel decisions based on this phobia of flying over water.
That's why I didn't go to Madrid.
I didn't know that. I'm learning something new about you every day.
So it also sounds weird because like you would think this is someone who, when they're in a plane, is fearful and anxiety ridden. Like, I enjoy flying. Not the travel part of it per se, like the booking the flight and all that.
Yeah.
But like being on a plane is great for me. I sit there, no one can bother me. I'm up in the air. The loud like zzz, I'm just sleeping. I'm the best sleeper on a plane you've ever met in your life.
Dude, Coach, I might be contending for that belt. I might be in that. Oh, dude. So when I was playing, like the second I get on the plane and the door closed, Like I like physically couldn't keep my eyes open. It felt like the oxygen level. I just was like, oh God.
So my co-host Danny, you have to talk to him about this. He jokes it's my superpower. Like if I'm the hardest person to fall asleep night to night ever.
Yeah.
Like my wife's like, please sleep, get off your phone, whatever. On an airplane, if I make it till we take off, it is a story. Like channel 11 p.m. Channel 5 News is out there going, Grant Paulsen didn't fall asleep before the plane took off. For more, let's talk to passenger Logan Paulsen. It's such a deal. And so you would think I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
It's just like everyone thinks it's so stupid. They're like, oh, well, you're screwed either way. No, you're not. You see, there's stories every week about this plane that landed at this place because something was afoot. Some bird ruined everything. Some machine wasn't working. And the pilot was just like, no problem. I'm trained for this. There's an airport 52 miles that way. There's no airports out there on that ocean blue, bud. It's just water.
I was going to say something. I was going to say something pretty morbid, but yeah. No, you're right. There's no airport.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. If the plane goes down, you're cooked.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, everyone says that, and guess what? It's not. It doesn't happen like that because I fixed the issue. I have a problem. I'm trained. I'm calm. I'm Sully Burger. We're gonna put this thing down and fix it.
Great reference by you. Great pull. Yep.
Thank you. But that's all I'm saying is I just want to be able to land at an airport. And unless they build an island with an airport halfway between here and Madrid, I probably ain't making it to the next one either.
I mean, you could fly to London because, again, you're hugging the coast and then you just jump the English Channel, which people swim. It's not that far, right? There's an airport right there. So, I mean, you could gamify this thing to get to mainland Europe, Coach, over some pretty heavy chunks of land here.
I'm going to do some research to see if that's true. I just know that everyone told me about all this hugging of the land, and then I watched a flight go straight across the water.
Well, no, you can't. There's no hugging of the land in Madrid, but going to London, you hug. You're hugging. You're like you and your kid. You're hugging that thing.
It's possible. We'll see. Again, research needs to be done. I'm not going to take your word for it, respectfully. Pilot Logan.
Wow.
I'm gonna do a little digging on this. Okay, I view you as a smart person. The next time you fly a plane to London will be the first. So you're gonna have to forgive me. All right, let's talk about Stefon Diggs next. We'll get into some questions from our listeners as well. This is Take Command. Welcome back, Take Command. You don't know who I had on my radio show this week to talk about Stefon Diggs coming to DC.
I don't know.
Your former teammate, Pierre Garçon.
Oh, let's go.
Dude, I love Pierre.
Great dude.
He's awesome. And he was just in good spirits, good mood, chuckling, talking about all the drift routes he ran and how much he loved playing in DC. But I had him on because he retweeted some aggregator account saying Stefon Diggs is interested in the Commanders or whatever, which I don't think was based on anything real. Yeah. And Pierre was like, this makes a lot of sense for both sides. I hope this happens. So we had him on to talk about it. But what about Diggs? We talk so much about Brandon Aiyuk. If you want a guy that is a bit of a diva, who's a gigantic question mark pain in the ass in different places in the past, isn't Diggs a better option for that? I mean, he went for 1,000 yards last year. He was healthy last year. He has been on the field performing. Now, he can't stay anywhere longer than a year, and he has fallen out of favor with the coaching staff in Minnesota, with weird relationship with Allen in Buffalo. I get it. I'm not saying he's squeaky clean. He's got a relationship with Cardi B that seems moderately volatile. They're screaming at each other on social media the other day. It's like this. There's a lot of things about this where the flags are not green or yellow, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Having said that, if I'm going to get into bed with somebody as a partnership here in football that has been a pain and is going to be a little bit of a massaging, a lot of work situation at the receiver position, I'll take the healthy guy who went for $1K last year.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And it's funny, I've talked to a couple people that have played with him, and I was expecting kind of what your rendition was. Oh, like he's a little bit of a diva, kind of your classic receiver guy. We've all are familiar with that kind of that persona. And to a man, it was like 4 or 5 people that I talked to. They were like, he's an awesome teammate. He's a great leader. He's a pro's pro. Like when it comes to coming in the building and working, he's able to kind of separate his social life, his business life from the stuff that happens in the locker room. And I didn't get one person that played with him to say a bad thing about him. Now, again, as a team and as an organization, that calculus is different because, the team is more than just the locker room. You're bringing in a guy, like you said, who's very forward facing, very, very public looking. But in terms of like the leadership stuff, like I was kind of shocked about some of the conversations he had with guys, like great mentorship conversations, great leadership, great kind of, again, just like familial interpersonal relationships that I was so surprised by. But so again, I'm a little bit higher on this probably than a lot of people. I think the one thing is I think Stefon Diggs is an excellent receiver. I think he's very good. I think he's nuanced. I think all the things you want to look for. My only question about this is, does this hurt Antonio Williams in some way in his development? And as we've talked about, I think you've talked to people over there as well. Like they are sky high on that kid. They are so looking forward to him kind of being a feature of this offense. Does Stefon Diggs, as a 30-year-old player who's kind of transitioning from a perimeter player to a slot player, cannibalize his reps and stunt his growth? Would be the only drawback I could possibly see to this. But when you, in addition to some of the organizational outlook, but in terms of what I've heard about him as a guy, watching the film from last year, like there's not a lot here. And when you compare him to Aiyuk, to me it's a no-brainer. It's Stefon Diggs all the way, and Aiyuk, every week that goes by, I just am like finding myself further and further removed from liking that as a move for the Commanders.
Based on like actions, based like all the pictures of him with the money and the watches, or like what are you basing that on?
Yeah, just that kind of stuff. It's just like, I keep coming back to this question, and I've posed it to you. I posed it on this podcast. Like, do you like football? You haven't played football for 2 years, so that's a really hard thing to come back from, just in general. And guys that do it are guys that love it. And right now, like, are you training? Are you working out? Like, what's your motivation to get back and be a contributing member to this team? And if you're going to be here, like as a coach, like I put my coaching hat on for a second. I'm like, I can't trust you to fill a role, right? Because I don't know if you're going to be in shape. I don't know if you're ready to go. I don't know if you're going to be prepared, because your recent history has kind of steered us clear of that. So I think that's the thing that makes it really, really hard for me to get behind that. But then you compare that to Stefon Diggs, and he's in shape. He played well. There's good leadership reports. Again, there's other things you have to negotiate. I'm not saying he's perfect, but that, to me, if you're looking for more receiver depth, that seems like an easy pick from my perspective.
He loves the ball. That has never been a question. Like, this is the guy that's going to sit on the field after the parade and the confetti falls post losing a conference championship game for 14 minutes with tears in his eyes because he wants to remember the pain. You know what I'm saying? Like, and the videos, like, I don't always think you got to record every workout. You weren't a guy doing that, but like, you can see this dude's putting in the work here locally with people back in the DMV. By the way, he's from this area, Good Counsel High School in Maryland, born in Gaithersburg, Maryland. He is a DMV lifer, went to the University of Maryland, 32 years old. You're talking about a 1-year deal. So I do think it would take away from Antonio Williams. I don't think there's any way to say otherwise because of Stefon Diggs's role. Last year, for the record, just so people know, he played in the slot 390 snaps and out wide 355 snaps out of 752. He was in the backfield a couple times. He was in line a couple times. But that is basically the Antonio Williams starter kit. You're talking about a guy who could play inside, who could play outside. Very comparable, very similar, like route runner. I don't want to say redundant, but you're hiring a guy, you're signing a guy that essentially does a lot of the same things you just drafted Williams to do. So does it ruin his development? No, it stunts it. It takes reps away for sure. That's something they've got to negotiate and consider here. But if we're saying they're going to bring in a veteran and the conversation is Aiyuk or Diggs, I'm also heavily in the Diggs category. And it's just the recency of last year. He caught 85 balls for 1,000 yards on a team that played in the Super Bowl. Like, he was the third down war daddy most year for Stefon Diggs. Like, it's third and Stefon routing somebody up on a choice or an option or something. Like, that happened a lot last year. Now, here's one problem I do have, in addition to some of the off-field antics and stuff. Have you ever met him, by the way?
I have not met him, no.
Dude, he is one of the most charming people I've ever met. Like, when I say, I'm not doing a bit, I interviewed him at Radio Row, okay? And you go to Radio Row every year and you interview, 20 celebrity / football players, 4 or 5 active players. I don't know that I've ever been more like smitten after an interview than I was with Stefon Diggs. He's a big personality. He's got a great smile. He's really comfortable. Just did a really good interview. And I was like, I freaking love this guy. I talked to someone recently who caught up with him and did an interview with him recently. And they're like, dude, they should sign Stefon Diggs. That guy's awesome. Like, you're not going to come away from an interaction with him not having that feeling, right? But then you know about the Bills, Josh Allen stuff. You know about the Vikings stuff. I see the videos out there of him and Cardi B and kind of that wackiness and whatever that is. So, like, that stuff's there too. But I would always be hesitant. GM Paulsen with my GM hat on. 23 with the Bills, 2024 with the Texans, 2025 with the Patriots. He's going to be on his fifth team in 5 years, essentially. Like, why is no one opting back in? Why are we doing a tour through the National Football League? That always gives me a little bit of pause.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at Houston, they had a bunch of young guys that they wanted to develop and bring along. And so that kind of makes sense to me. And obviously, he had the injury in Minnesota. When was that injury? That was in, I forget what year that was. But that was summer.
The ACL, right? Was Houston.
Yeah. And so, again, like, you're kind of coming off, what is he going to be coming back? We drafted a lot of young players. So that makes sense to me. And from what I've heard from talking with people up in New England, I think they do kind of want to re-sign him. But again, he's an older receiver. Like, what kind of money does he want? And what kind of opportunity is Diggs looking for? I think that's a legitimate question. Because if New England's going to trade for A.J. Brown, like, do you want to re-sign there if you want to be the kind of the guy like you just mentioned? So some of it to me can be explained away based on his injury history, but based on kind of what kind of role he's looking for in an offense. But I do think it's a relevant point to be discussing, no doubt. But I also think that he's a good football player who loves football, who's done it at a high level recently. And so if you want someone to come in and kind of offset and fill in, this feels like the right opportunity.
Pro Bowler in 2022 and 23, and AP second team All-Pro in 2022, AP first team All-Pro in the COVID year in 2020, and has led the league in some categories over the years. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. He's now bounced around, though, a little bit. All right, we'll get to your questions. You can always send them in to us. Either comment below this pod on YouTube or in the comments wherever you get your audio, and our producer Evan digs those up. Or you can just send them directly to me, and I put together a little file for our mailbag episodes at Grant Paulsen on Twitter, and probably more easy at Grant H. Paulsen on Instagram. We'll get to those questions next. Welcome back to Take Command, Logan and Grant. Let's get to some mailbag questions. Ronald asks, I'd love to hear some of the specific things that coaching will be working on with Joshua Josephs, Matt Golban, and even Antonio Williams, for instance, turning them into NFL players, and who are some players that they have been successful in developing already. Kind of a player development question here, Logan. So let's just start with Josephs. Let's go rapid fire here. What is the coaching point you think with him, and what are they going to try to develop and hone?
Yeah, so I think one thing that I want to say before we get started is the NFL, everyone, it gets a rap for like not developing talent. I personally think that in the league, you have to be willing to develop yourself. And I think this conversation about Joshua Josephs will illuminate that, because what are the things that he's got to work on? He's got to develop, a more diverse pass rush profile. And what does that look like? As a coach, I can show you tape of guys doing different moves. I can give you drills of guys doing different moves. But when you're developing a pass rusher, it really is time on task. It's about how many reps you can bank with these reps, with these looks that we're going to give you. And in practice, I can get you maybe 3 legitimate pass rushes in practice. I can get you a couple one-on-ones. So we're talking about maybe 5 reps over the course of practice. So your development profile, let's say I'm trying to teach you a cross chop, right? And you can talk about the efficiency or effectiveness of that move at the NFL level, but let's just take that as an example. I need you to bank about 100, 50 a day. We're talking maybe 500 for the week, and that's going to happen on your own time. And so I go back to my own development arc here, thinking about, like, a coach came to me and said, hey, Logan, we need to get your second step down in the run game. And so every day in practice, I'd work on it. Eventually, I came to the realization that there is not enough reps in practice for me to get my second step down with this. So I need to make sure I develop on my own. And so with Joshua Josephs, the A to B destination is very easy. We need to give you more diversity in pass rush. The journey to get there the steps and the where we're staying for hotels, all those different things, that's up to him. And I really think like that's the process. And I think the coaching staff here is very smart. They're going to give him things to do, give him opportunities to do those things. But he's really got to own those opportunities as best as he possibly can, because it takes a lot of banked reps to get good at a pass rush move versus NFL offensive linemen versus NFL speed versus NFL length.
What about Matt Golban? What are they going to work on with him?
Yeah, I think for him, to me, the learning has got to come in the playbook. Like, as one of his superpowers, in my opinion, and again, like, I don't know him personally, but just in terms of watching the tape, is his ability to know and digest the calls at the line of scrimmage. So if that is my superpower, if I'm really good at that, I need to make sure that Matt Golban, study the book tremendously, right? So that I can bring that same superpower to an NFL practice, to an NFL game, to an NFL preseason, to an NFL joint practice. So the coaches see me and they say, oh man, this guy's really bringing that same level of intelligence to the field as a rookie. And so I think that's where I'd say, if I'm him, if I was advising him, I'd be like, man, just make sure you know that book at the highest of levels so you can do you at a really high level. Now, there's some other physical things, dealing with defensive linemen, the size, the speed. That's always a big adjustment for offensive linemen, specifically because they're not used to dealing with those types of athletes in college. But I would say for him specifically, like, let's know the book. Let's make sure we can be what we're supposed to be when it comes to getting this offense targeted in the right way.
Good question from Ronald here, talking about player development. Antonio Williams is known as, a pretty sharp route runner already. Didn't run all the routes a ton, though. It was a lot of around the line of scrimmage stuff, screens, things that were closer and safer, throws. Maybe developing some of his downfield game, I would think, and just the ability to run deeper routes. What else for him would you say?
I mean, that's probably part of it. I think if you look at him in 2024, that stuff's on tape a little bit more than it was in 2025. And so for me, like, one of the things that I think about, in the Stefon Diggs conversation as well, is just the value of that experience. And like, how do you gain that experience? And like, what kind of relationship can you develop with Jaden Daniels? Like, can you make sure you're seeing, this fire zone the same way? So when you run that choice route, you end up in the same spot as the quarterback wants you to end up, or, hey, we're getting this dig and I really want this to be a second window throw. So do I know how to tempo my route when I feel that zone? And so that stuff, again, that takes a lot of time, that takes a lot of reps, but he has shown a decent feel for that at the college level. And how quickly can you develop that rapport and understanding, that continuity of understanding with Jaden Daniels? I think that's going to be a big thing for him heading into the season.
So I hadn't really thought about this at all, but this is actually something that I find fairly jarring just looking at the roster, and something I'm actually going to plan to talk about on my daily show on The Fan now, but I want to bounce this off you. The other part of his question was about player development and who they've developed to this point. That's impressive. I think it's hard to find guys. I mean, I don't mean to slight them, but like, if you look at it, a guy like Mike Sanderstil took a step back last year. Now, the nit you could pick is, generally with higher draft picks, I'm not viewing those as like big time developmental guys. I'm looking at them as like, oh, you picked the right player. But the names I came up with that I would say have flourished and become better versions of themselves with this regime: Chris Paul, the 7th round pick in the past, has played his best football since they got here. I think Tyler Owens, because he was a UDFA, I've got to assume had some holes in his game, and they've turned him into a solid little NFL player who would be signed, I think, if he got released here, with his length. And then Jordan McGee has gotten better since he's been here. I liked how he ran and hit last year at the second level defensively. But that's kind of what I came up with in terms of what are your wins in development. Like a guy like Bill, you could say. But, I mean, when they drafted him in the 7th round, the first week of training camp, he was the talk of camp, and everyone thought he was going to make the team. And from the start of the year to the end of the year, it wasn't like he was that different. There were still things they didn't quite trust, or he wasn't carrying the mail. So I don't know. It's a little bit hard to find guys you would say are gigantic player development wins for them.
I'd say, Josh Connolly over the course of last year, I thought developed quite a bit. I think you look at Revo, how he developed at the safety spot specifically last year. That was kind of a testament to the staff. There are pieces, but again, I look at, this goes back to the thing I just talked about. Like, you need to make sure you're bringing in people who want to develop themselves. And like, having talked with Revo, having talked with Josh Connolly, having talked with Chris Paul, like, that's a motivating factor for them, right? So a lot of those guys you just talked about, like, they are self-starters, and they're finding ways to improve themselves as the season goes on. So as much as you want to kind of point to the staff and say you haven't developed these guys, a lot of it is how you're bringing in those people, and then are you giving them the tools where they can go out on their own and kind of find that development. And again, so I think it's kind of unfair. I understand that they're coaches and that's the responsibility of the coach to get that done. But really, to me, it falls on the player. And maybe that's me as a former player talking, but that's kind of my perspective on it.
No, that's a good point. I'm laughing because I just read the next question. It's hilarious. So this guy, Zach Hyde, wants to know, we know how crazy Brandon Aiyuk is, but is it possible he's crazy like a fox and he's actually gaming the system so he can go free and clear to Washington and he can make sure they don't have to give up anything? Similar to when James Harden gets fat when he wants out in the NBA. Which is just a hilarious, that's a great bit. I mean, he does. Yeah. He gets out of shape. He wears hoodies under his jersey so he looks puffy, and he just stops investing in any way. I think he's being funny, and this is an overstated question, but I do think there's some of this. He wants nothing to do with San Francisco. He's definitely agitating and trying to be the biggest pain in the butt possible. He also does seemingly want to be in Washington, and I think he's going to steer his way there. So if that makes this calculated, I suppose. But the willingness to do some of this is still problematic. I mean, it still makes you a wild card that, for me personally, I don't want anything to do with as a GM. The other part is you don't have to drive 120 past the stadium, flicking off the stadium or whatever to try to get to Washington. Him just with bands and bands of money and buying jewelry or whatever that was he was posting yesterday, which is just kind of a weird thing to post as a grown-up professional person. I don't think that has anything to do with the fact that he wants to be a commander. So there might be a little from column A and a little from column B here.
Oh, the other thing I would say too is you can still be crazy and malcontented and want out of San Francisco, but I don't need to burn every other bridge with every other team, because even if I want to go to Washington and be a commander, ultimately that's my decision, right? So and maybe I can get a little bit more money if, just as an example, Pittsburgh makes me an offer and the Commanders really need a number 2, so they make me an offer that's a little bit better. So I just feel like at every turn he's costing himself money and opportunity. And even if with the way he handled his rehab, it's just, you're costing yourself money and opportunity. And I think it's very telling that, people that have mentored him for a long time are kind of distancing themselves from him. That's, to me, that's always a bad sign. So I think there's crazy like a fox.
TJ Hushmanzada, who was at one point his personal coach, Hushmanzada is taking shots at him every chance he gets. That's not great.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm saying there. And so to me, yes, there's crazy like a fox. And I feel like now we're just kind of transitioning into an unprofessional space, quite honestly, where it's you're costing yourself money, you're making it hard for people to vouch for you. Those things are different. And again, I don't know him, but at least that's what it looks like, kind of looking at all the variables or all the pieces on the chessboard.
Last one here is actually something that you talked quite a bit about on a pod last week. So I would say to Jeff and anybody who's interested in this to go back to Wednesday's pod from a week ago. But he asks, what did the part of rookie minicamp that you were able to see reveal about the offensive and defensive schemes? And we did a detailed breakdown of how the new rookies looked and some early observations on them, as well as some little tells about the scheme. But the cliff notes here, just to give him a little preview of what you talked about there, takeaways from the offense and defense that look different.
Yeah, I mean, it looks drastically different in my opinion, and in ways that you would expect. Offensively, again, you're seeing a larger variety of personnel. You're seeing a wider array of formations. You're seeing a wider array of motions and pre-snap movement. And again, this is day 1, day 2 install, but that's kind of what you'd expect. David Blau is coming from the Ben Johnson tree, coming from the Kevin O'Connell tree. Those guys are all kind of derivatives of the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan tree. And those are things that characterize them. The formations are a little bit more condensed. They marry, run, pass. There's not a huge tell difference between the two of them. So I think that's something that offensively, at least, is encouraging. And we'll see how that progresses, how that stays organized as they go through OTAs, minicamp, and training camp. So I can't wait to watch that thing evolve. And then defensively, I think you saw kind of their base quarter structure, right? You got the 4 DBs in the back. You got the 3-4 front. I think you see, again, it's different structurally than what it was the year prior. So that's always kind of interesting, which was a 4-down structure last year. And I think you see a little bit more opportunities based on the front spacing for pressures, for kind of zone drops, for fire zones, all the things like foundational pieces we saw from the Flores defense in Minnesota. I think this is how I would install it from a day one perspective, right? This is our base structure. This is our base coverage. These are some pressures and fire zones we can run off of it, but all very vanilla, all day one. But again, it's a ramp up from what we had here in years past. So I think all of both the rookie mini camps, offensively and defensively, kind of show you kind of what you'd expect to see, and we'll just see where the trajectory goes and how this thing evolves over the next couple months.
Take command with Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen. We give you 3 episodes a week. We'll be back on Wednesday. Thanks for checking us out. For producer Evan and for Logan, I'm Grant saying so long.